Ladies and gentlemen, I am Mamta Khanti and I will be your host for the session today. Good evening and welcome to the webinar session on iRobot Legal Issues that will Shape Robotics. The session will be presented by my colleagues Vaibhav, Huzefa, Tavawalla, Dr.Milind, Antani, Ashish, Sodhani, and Preetha, Soman. Please note that this session will be in listen-only mode and will last for about 60 minutes, of which about 30 to 40 minutes will be spent on panel discussion. The remaining time will be available for question and answer. Requesting all the participants to be on mute mode for the session. You can post your questions in the chat window while the panel discussion is on. The moderator will queue up the questions for the speaker recording. Should you need any assistance during the conference call, you can use the chat option. Do note that this conference is being recorded. I now welcome our session presenters, Vaibhav Parikh, leader, CMP practice, and also heads our US operations. Huzefa Tavawalla. Huzefa heads the Bangalore office of NDA and is also an avid techno legal enthusiast. Dr. Antani, a surgeon turned lawyer, leads pharma, healthcare, medical device and digital health practice at NDA and is involved in regulatory advice and policy advocacy. Ashish Sodhani. Ashish focuses on globalization and externalization of corporate transactions and regularly represents plans before various forums including tribunals, various high courts and Supreme Court of India in relation to disputes on international tax. Preetha, Soman, leader, HR law practice. Over to you, Webunar, our moderator this evening.
Thank you, Mamta. Welcome, friends. Welcome to the session on robotics. We have been seeing advent of robotics, robots in several sectors. More and more things are being done by robots. And there has always been a situation where there has been a worry that what kind of role robots will play in our life. With COVID-19 happening, I think people have realized to have an importance of working from home. For service sector, it is possible that you can work from home. For manufacturing sector, it has been difficult to have any concept of work from home. Now in that situation, robots can actually play a major role where they can continue working in factories and they can be controlled by people who can work from home, right? Also, situations are where robots will now become more autonomous so that you don't need people controlling them so that the work continues. So this pandemic will push more robotization in the industry. I think more and more people are going to look at saying that how my supply chain is not affected and how at least some of the production can be handled by robots. How people can work from home and control the robots, or robots can be on autonomous mode. We're going to see robots right from someone who is doing very basic tasks to more sophisticated robots which are going to take decisions on what should be done. You're going to see robots in various industries. You're going to see robots including in healthcare, in manufacturing, in delivery. A lot of new technologies are going to combine to make this happen. You will see convergence of AI in robotics. You will see convergence of IoT sensors, which will allow robots to do a lot more autonomous function. You will see medtech, and robots are going to play a critical functions in healthcare. You're going to see drones becoming closely integrated with robots. So what you're going to see is a lot of automation and independent work being done by machines, and that raises a lot of new legal questions which we have not yet encountered today. To some extent, there's already some discussions which are happening because we do have robots in a lot more rudimentary form in sense when you compare with what is likely to happen in future. But so this session is what we are going to look at the legal issues and how the whole robotics will kind of outlay how it will grow, and how the law will develop around robots. I will moderate this session, but before I moderate, we all remember the movie I, Robot, and we all remember Isaac Asimov's very successful and famous series on robots, and the 3 laws of robots which basically govern how the robots are going to function. So the question really is that are we going to see something similar coming in real life, or is it not going to happen? So that's something which we will explore today on how the laws are going to be developed. With this, Ashish, let me go and ask you this question. What are the key verticals markets where robots are likely to be used?
I think there were a few, I think, touched upon this lightly, and maybe I'll just get into this to give an idea about how and where robots are being used today. I think if you look at industries which robots are being used today in the automotive industry, manufacturing industry, the food and beverage industry, the upcoming would be so the delivery and the warehousing industry where robots are used regularly. Of course, we are all developing these robots and how they will be high human interventions. This is something that we are going to see. As of today, some of these industries are being completed for these robots are being used by human intervention, and because the robots are functioning. If I were to divide the functions that these robots end up doing, that would come down to be soldering and welding, material handling, assembling and disassembling, sometimes painting, cutting and processing, and some of these forms where robots are being used today. It's interesting to see how robots are being used, especially particularly because the precision with which a robot will work can be better than the human, of course, and therefore these industries which require precision, perfection, is somewhere where we will see robots coming up more.
Thank you, Ashish. I think looking at where it is being used today, it's just a start, right? And you're going to see in a lot of places where we are not yet envisaged. So that's something which we'll have to wait and watch. But I definitely foresee that robots will be a lot more common. If you just fast forward 5 years or 10 years, you will see robots playing a lot more important role in life than what it does today. With that, let's come to Huzefa. Huzefa, can you broadly cover the legal issues associated with robots?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just touching from what you and Ashish said, right? The entire purpose is that you don't know what the use is today. So probably just if I can take a crack at it, I will branch them into 2 aspects, and that's where the actual liabilities and legal issues go. One is when robots from a sector perspective are more akin to personal use or for personal services, which include medtech and those sort of things. The legal issues are completely different. They favor more towards in terms of medical negligence, more towards privacy, data protection, so forth, so on, which as we move along in the session, we are going to touch base upon. And of course, the other broader bucket is industrial use. Now, there could be overlaps, there could be shades of grey, but essentially these are the broad 2 verticals. When you come to an industrial use, again, the legal issues are completely different, because the way industrial use works is that usually the people who are deploying the robots don't always own it. It's a leasing model which is followed across the industry, specifically when it comes to the construction space, engineering space, the automotive space, whereby large companies actually lease robots, to the industrial application deployment, and then subsequently they are also customized for use basis specifications and categorizations. In addition to this, there is also a service and maintenance provider which could either be the commissioner / owner of the robot or any third party partnership. Now, this sounds, and the immediate inference which we can take is like to any normal deployment of machines in any industry, how would the liability actually flow? But here the interesting bit is, as Vaibhav mentioned, that with the passage of time, the robots keep getting autonomous, which means that they also will start becoming smart, and they will rely less and less upon human intervention. So basically, it is pre-programmed, it is given certain data sets, and it actually works based on that. Now the question is, what happens when something goes wrong? Whether it is personal deployment, whether it is industrial deployment, right? How would the liability flow actually pan through, from a user perspective, from an owner perspective, and, probably for third parties involved from a service provider perspective? Yes, the contracts would need to be relooked at, or, negotiated in a end-to-end manner, which is of course will be done. But secondly, how do you actually trigger and balance the function of a robot when it is autonomous and none of these three parties are actually liable for the acts of the robot? It's not very clear. It's not extremely black, but there are shades of grey. In fact, most recently on this point, the European Union has actually released a white paper. It was one of the pioneers a couple of years back where they issued a consultative not a directive, but a consultative resolution. And in February 2020, they actually released a white paper which actually spells out the broad framework for AI and robotics. And taking note, Webunar from the iRobot and the principles followed in iRobot, specifically the ASIMOS principles. Some of them have actually been enshrined in that white paper, which means the fundamental being that when a robot is being deployed, the essence being that it should not do harm. And of course, there are some other principles. This is one thing in terms of the chain, in terms of the liability aspects. I think the second common issue when the robots start becoming more and more smart and autonomous, specifically when they're used for R&D purposes, when they're used for technology collaborations, medtech deployment and innovation. How do you actually understand the ownership of an IP? Now, typically, broadly, the IP laws across the world, and specifically when it comes to India, usually the person who is creating is the owner of the IPs, which is also called the author. Say for copyrights or for certain patents, it becomes the inventor. And there are certain provisions under law which say that if the generation or the output is happening through a machine or a computer program, the person who causes that deployment or that output will be the owner. Say that's the principle in terms of copyright law, for example. Now, if you extrapolate this principle, the interesting nuance being that what happens when the robot starts creation on its own, which is not based on the data sets or the principles which were put in by the manufacturer or by the user. Then the ownership cannot be vested, and it gets even more interesting, which I will correlate as we go later on, specifically in terms of attributing statehood. So these are some of the issues when it comes, from an IP perspective. I think the other fundamental issue which comes is, governments also have started deploying robots, and across the world. Yes, the quantum of robots are small, but they help in terms of safety, they help in terms of security. Webunar actually gave an example in terms of drones. Drones are nothing but it's a flying robot which is actually controlled by a computer software. So these things have been used by governments, and when they actually start being used more and more in terms of daily lives, which kind of substitute human jobs from a government perspective. Things like whether it violates fundamental rights, whether the deployment is a violation of right to livelihood or right to life. Now, of course, these are untested principles, these are uncharted territories, but I'm sure with the passage of time, these sort of things will come into play. I think the last bit, which I also want to touch upon is the whole concept of open source robotics. Now, this is something which is, really moving across the world, specifically where the physical deployment of the artifact, that is the overall body of the robot, is developed by a developer or an engineer, but the algorithms or the programs within it are embedded by dedicated open source libraries for robots which are available on the net. So they are just specifically available for these sort of purposes and cater to the robotic industries. Now, when these sort of algorithms actually converge into an open source robot, and the user is actually further deploying these robots, for commercial use, then if anything sort of goes wrong, how will the liability actually pan out, and can you go behind the open source library providers? The co-basis to all of this is the concept of product liability, right? How do you kind of, in the entire value chain, attribute product liability? Because typically the principles of product liability are the manufacturer is liable, or people associated in the relevant chain, example like a product seller, would be held liable. And the liability essentially stretches for a defect, which is actually a manufacturing defect, a product defect, or a breach of warranty, anything got to do with the rightful use of the product. Going by the very notion whereby the robot would get autonomous, the robot would get smart, in those sort of situations, how would the liability actually pan out? Of course, we may not have answers to all of this, but I'm sure as we proceed in this discussion, we're going to touch upon more issues. And we'll kind of circle back on some more. So over to you, Vaibhav.
Thank you, Huzefa. I think this was a very interesting and comprehensive discussion on the issues, legal issues on once the robots start playing a big role. And look at when we think of robots, we always think of a metal humanoid form, someone which has 2 legs, 2 hands, a face kind of a thing, 2 eyes, which are cameras. Now, this is not what we're going to, it's not likely that we're going to see robots like this. There may be few of them which may be going around, or we are not likely just to see the kind of robots which you have seen in Star Trek, right? But robots will have a different shape, different forms. Robots will have specific functionalities. It will just be a specific focused robots. But there are a few things which are going to be very interesting. First is, where do you draw a line? What is a robot and what is not, right? What is a machine, normal simple machine, and what is robots, right? And those developments are going to actually get further refined. There's already a concept of there's already a definition in industry of what robots are, but that's going to further kind of get refined on as we go forward. We are also likely to see, machine to machine discussion. It means that there will be multiple robots and the instructions by one robot will be given by the other robots. Now, when one robot is giving this, instruction to other robots, right? You will have a different place coming into picture. Laws will not be there on how things should work, and often companies will need to take on their own on the ethical, and you will incorporate ethics while developing algorithms or functionalities of the robots. We always believe that law is a laggard, in a sense that technology moves much faster and law takes time to catch up. You take a number of examples, whether it is e-commerce, whether it is, ride sharing, technology actually moves much faster and law had to catch up. If you see in robots, it won't be any different. So how do we protect ourselves, or how do you make sure that while the law is still being developed, right, things are taken care, and that is where ethics come into picture. A lot of companies are actually incorporating ethics as a part of their process when they develop technology. We had a discussion on AI a couple of days ago, where we dealt with this issue in detail on how you can view ethics in AI. The recording would be available soon. If you want to deal with it, you should go back if you have not participated in that event. That, in my mind, will become an important factor. But with this, let me go back to Huzefa on the question of statehood. You did allude to statehood, Huzefa. What do you think on granting of statehood to robots, and what are your thoughts?
I think just before that, I think the link up to this, there are two very critical points, right? I think Webunar, you rightfully said that the whole definition of robots itself is evolving, and that has a direct nexus to statehood. In the original sense, it was meant to be like a machine which resembles a human being and to replicate certain human movements and functionalities automatically. But obviously that has changed. No more, as you rightly said, that robots are not always human resemblances or lookalikes. Essentially, it is a smart machine which is executing tasks with precision and efficiency. But as there could be various definitions. And I think the other interesting and important part in relation to robotics is how will mankind and robots coexist. I think that is another very interesting interplay. That if robots need to be deployed in mainstream and which are moving, it's not like a stationary machine of sorts, and if it's moving, how will the interaction actually end up playing? Because that has a direct bearing in terms of statehood. The only robot which has been granted statehood, which happened in 2017, was Sophia, where Saudi Arabia actually granted statehood. In October 2017, early October 2017, Sophia made a presence in the United Nations, and later that month it was granted statehood, which meant in this case that Sophia became a citizen of Saudi Arabia. Now this was not let alone to criticism, because one of the three fundamentals which were actually digested and digressed and looked upon in this particular case was, by granting citizen to Sophia, what is the unique identity which has been created for Sophia from a citizen right perspective? Second, does it have legal rights? Now, the fundamental to statehood has always been twofold across jurisprudence, internationally. The language can change, the
Okay, so I think we may have lost Huzefa in terms of, but can you guys hear me? Okay, so we will come back to Huzefa. I think on that, but that's an interesting point. He was talking about statehood, and statehood, a lot of issues and implications. So we will come back to that. But let me move forward. We talked about healthcare, and healthcare is another area where we are likely to see a lot of robotics. So there's a lot of value and a lot of benefits to it. But also there is a lot of liability which can come from robotics being used in healthcare. And we have Dr.Milind, and I would request him to tell us what is happening in healthcare, how robots are kind of coming in.
it was an error.
Yeah, so Huzefa, sorry, just I will come back to you later. Let me. I've already gone to Dr. Antani on healthcare, so I'll come back to you on the earlier question later.
No problem.
Yeah. No.
I think, Vaibhav, you touched upon a very important point, and robotics technology growing in India. And when you mentioned role of robotics in healthcare, I think the doctor in me gives me a huge smile on my face. That the loyalty is down because how acceptance of that robotics will happen at multiple levels. And I'm sure as you mentioned, and Ashish also touched upon that, when you use robotics in healthcare, from all locals, there is some kind of a moderation part of patients as well as doctors. And to understand that, let me just briefly know how exactly robotics are happening in not necessarily globally. First, what robotics are doing in healthcare? Primarily, I see their role in healthcare is threefold. First is on the therapeutic side, second is on diagnostic side, and third is the supplementary side. Now, let me take diagnostic side first. Robots are playing a huge role globally, including in some parts of India, where the nano robots, or we call it endoscopic robots, that are being formed, developed, which are a small tiny capsule. Swallowed, just as if you swallow a capsule and it captures it into the entire GI tract, the respiratory tract, which for a doctor is one of the most, in medical terms, one of the most notorious organ in the body is GI tract, because it is not easily accessible to CT scans or MRI, that is why people do either endoscopy or colonoscopy to see with naked eye what exactly is happening. And those procedures are not easy, cumbersome, not that the patient is always compliant to that. That is where I think the nano robots, which capture images of entire GI tract right from oral cavity to rectum, that become a huge basics for the diagnosis surgery for that. Another important role I think robots are playing on diagnosis side is they become a phlebotomist. So kind of they are helping pathologists and laboratories on collecting blood and most recipients, especially and performing certain tests. And that is where I think in the present scenario of COVID where multiple tests are required, robots are likely to control information. So on the diagnostic side, on surgical side, I think the biggest comfort that you will give is what Ashish mentioned. Accuracy which a robot will give and the way it is going to enhance the ability of a surgeon is definitely going to add significant value and expertise on the surgical side. And third I mentioned, which is the most practiced, most available on the supplementary side, where robots are used for assist nursing staff or they become nurse themselves, delivery of medications, the entire ward, or disinfecting operations, theaters, etc. Now this is what it does. Now how exactly it is happening in India and globally? So as I mentioned, we become a great surgical assistant, when I mentioned when you think of surgeons assisting and robots assisting surgeons are not actually the humanoid in that one. Humanoid robot comes with its alphabet and foresight and operating. It is the technology, but that is a huge thing. As I mentioned, endoscopy, board, and disinfecting robots are very popular. They also play a significant role as prosthetics. Whenever there is an injury or some kind of a congenital deformity, where robotics are playing significant role. Recently, we have seen the microbots are developed, which has antimicrobial property or antibacterial property. So many times it is difficult to have patients absorb the medications which are required to combat infection. That is why the microbots which contain antibacterial properties go to that. And that reminds me that they also play significant role in specific drug delivery. And apart from that, they also play a role in epidemiology, telemedicine. So robots are there everywhere. We have seen robots being used as a clinical test training. And like when I became an ENT surgeon, it was mandatory for us to do surgery on 50 cadavers. So that type of cadaveric research is put on to robotic clinical training. They become companions to patients in certain hospitals. So broadly speaking, robots are playing significant and very positive role. And you talk about India, also we have a lot of hospitals doing the remote robotic surgery as well as various surgeries, supportive care. We have companies like Casimo, Institute Surgical, Da Vinci, you have IBM's, Watson and other technologies in Europe, strikers very active in India. So all those things are playing major role. And recently we have seen exoskeletons, which is a kind of a robot which is going to give walking to the paraplegic. It is the paralyzed legs patients which have started becoming very popular. Now all these things lead to the concerns. I think a lawyer as well as doctor feel that there will be some kind of an apprehension. Huzefa touched upon liability. I'll check it last that who is liable? Patient, doctor is patient is considered a consumer, and there are various laws where medical legal happen on negligence. But doctors are worried whether the robot performs something wrong. Technology can go wrong, not that robot is 100% surety that nothing wrong will happen. So whether the technology owner or the software developer or the owner of the company will be held liable, whether doctor should be held liable or not, there is one important point. But the biggest concern I had is the trust factor. For doctors as well as companies, to develop that trust in patient that a machine going to operate me is going to make me well. Same is the issue with the doctor. Can I give full trust in this robot who will perform better than what I have been doing? So this is one issue which is going to become concern and we need to think on that. Another interesting point I think Huzefa covered is, does robot have life? That may become a very important point that when robots operating on a patient or doing some auxiliary healthcare services, would robot have some rights? I can do this, I cannot do this. That also will become an issue. And of course, whenever something will happen, tax always comes into picture. And we're happy that we have Ashish on the panel. He will touch upon what are taxation issues that can happen. But most important thing other than trust is not pure legal, but it is going to play one's ethics. I always believe that always there is a fight between head and heart. And I see that law is head and ethics is heart. And when you use robotics in healthcare, I think you have to balance both head and the heart, ethics and law, to come up with the best possible scenario, which expedite the usage of technology of robots to provide the best possible healthcare, not in India, but globally. I'm sure in a situation like this that we are in where Singapore or India, robots are going to play significant role as a health system.
Thank you. Huzefa, let me come back to you. I think we had lost you when you're talking about statehood, right? If you can just spend a couple of minutes before we go to, looking at HR and tax issues on statehood.
Yeah. So I think just very quickly to sum up, right? I think there are a lot of grays in terms of if you need to give an identity to a robot, whether it's akin to a citizenship which is state-owned, whether it is personhood because personhood is more akin to an actual person, or do you treat it as an artificial heuristic person like a corporation or an entity? All of these, there will not be a straitjacket approach because essentially each one has its own challenges and nuances. But a related point to all of this is that how you treat it will also depend in terms of what sort of liabilities can be attributed to the machine, right? Because there are various principles from a tort law perspective, there are various principles from a product liability perspective, which I mentioned earlier. And more importantly, how do you enforce all of this? Simply from a tort law principle, the whole concept of negligence and duty to care, right? Does a machine actually have a duty to care in that sense? And if anything goes wrong, how would you actually recover the losses? In terms of if the robot goes rogue, if it's a smart robot, and if it undertakes some sort of a criminal wrong, what sort of liabilities will you actually go and enforce on a machine? And to what extent will the liability flow to the person who is actually creating the robot? Because the robot could have just been created for a simplistic use, but eventually became smart and lost complete functionality. The other whole theory in terms of liability is more of a risk-based approach, that the natural person who was last in charge of the robot, or who had the closest proximity to manage the robot before it kind of created any harm or damage, can actually impute liability to that sort of a natural person. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the European Union has released a white paper just a couple of months back in February 2020. They have laid down some principles in terms of inherently there has to be a structure by design, which is more of a security structure by design, that it doesn't kind of go wrong or it doesn't do human harm. So I think it will have to be a combination of all of this. It's not exactly like a state road, person road, or a artificial juristic person, but it may have to be a hybrid of all. And let's see how in real-time life these sort of things unfold. What do you, Vaibhav?
Thank you. I know a lot of questions are coming in, but I think we will take questions at the end. I really want to now hear Preetha. We've been talking about robots replacing humans. This is the biggest worry everyone has, that if they replace humans, what will humans do? What will be their role? What are the legal issues from HR law perspective? Preetha, you can talk about which we will encounter because of robots.
So Vaibhav, you mentioned earlier that, especially in the context of the COVID-19 outbreak, the evolution of robotics, and I would completely agree, that the impetus is going to become much more stronger now, because it's become much more imperative for employers now to ensure. Sorry, am I audible?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was saying was that, especially because of the COVID-19 situation, it has become much more imperative for employers across industries to now ensure that they come up with much more viable solutions where they can ensure business continuity in extremely uncertain situations like the COVID pandemic that we just encountered. Right. So, and in fact, if you see the last couple of weeks, it's been a huge learning lesson for several employers across industries. Several industries have suffered immensely because of the fact that, maybe because they required human intervention for different kinds of job roles and responsibilities, and things could not be managed remotely, right? So human intervention is something that is absolutely important, the way things have been working so far. So while the robotic revolution has been in the pipeline for quite some time now, I would strongly believe that in the years to come, we will see a huge shift with more and more machines replacing quite a few jobs. And that's where, the whole HR landscape is likely to change. Right. In fact, there have been several recent studies that have suggested that several graduate level jobs across the globe are likely to be replaced by robots. And of course, there are different schools of thoughts relating to how this will pan out in the coming years, right? On the one side, while there is an argument that this is going to boost productivity, things are going to work out much more better than how it is being working now in terms of how the work gets delivered and so on and so forth. On the other hand, there is a constant worry that this is possibly going to affect a lot of job opportunities, right? Where, like you said, a lot of human jobs are likely to be replaced by robots, right? So when this evolution actually takes place in India, I would expect a huge change in the workforce landscape in India. We could have situations where human jobs are completely being replaced by robots. We could have situations where robots are working alongside humans. You could even have very interesting situations where humans are reporting into robots, or even vice versa, where probably robots are reporting into humans.
So all of these kind of situations are likely to evolve as we see a paradigm shift in the way the workforce evolves. And of course, each of these models, each of these scenarios are going to throw upon to us a lot of issues that we may not have encountered in the past as employers. And again, if you look at it from the legal perspective, right, if you look at the way Indian labor laws are presently structured, and several of these laws which are being framed during the industrial era, right? Now the question is whether these laws are actually equipped to encompass this kind of a situation where you have robots stepping into the shoes of humans, right? Where several terms and conditions of employment which are outlined under these labor laws may to a large extent even become redundant or obsolete when you have these kind of working arrangements. And again, it may not be possible at this point in time to comprehend what all kinds of situations are likely to evolve. But one thing is for sure that several of the employment challenges that we face nowadays may not be the kind of issues that we will see as robots start taking start stepping into the shoes of humans. While say for example issues relating to working hours, issues relating to overtime, leaves on account of sickness, several of these aspects, if you look at it, which are things that are looked upon by employment laws presently, several of these things may become redundant as and when you have robots stepping into the shoes of humans. So, you may have other major challenges such as, say for example, how do you deal with grievances with robots, especially in a scenario where you have humans working alongside robots? Or say for example, how do you deal with discrimination claims arising out of this kind of a work setup? Or situations where employers are completely used to a situation where they exercise extreme amount of supervision and control over employees, and when you have robots stepping into their shoes, things are going to change. And like Huzefa also mentioned earlier, after a point, robots also start becoming autonomous, right? And in terms of how do you categorize robots under the old employment law landscape? What are the rights that robots will have vis-a-vis humans, right? So all of these are several different legal challenges from an HR landscape that could crop up. Several of the issues that may be, while of course, while there will be advantages and disadvantages with this kind of an evolution, on the one hand, while employers will be able to do away with issues relating to, say, for example, trade unions and strikes and lockouts and the typical kind of issues that they encounter, specifically in industries like the manufacturing sector. The evolution of robotics in India and globally may bring about a huge positive change in that respect. But again, the kind of issues that are likely to crop up is something that may not be imminent at this stage, and may be something that we will have to wait and watch. And of course, another imminent danger that appears in respect of robots stepping into the shoes of humans is the fact that several jobs may become, several job opportunities may be lost, which could naturally lead to mass layoffs or termination. And we all know that employment terminations in India are not easy to handle, right? And those kind of situations could pose a lot of other additional challenges for employers. One of the most imminent and one of the issues that are likely to crop up immediately with the evolution of robotics in the Indian industry from an employment perspective would largely be employment terminations. And then of course, once that is sorted and once we get into the whole landscape of dealing with the robotic workforce, then the kind of challenges that would evolve in that kind of a landscape would also be very different from what possibly employers are used to currently. With that, over to you, Vaibhav.
Thank you, Preetha. I think more and more we think about it, more new issues are coming up in various facets, and we looked at the labor law issues and HR law issues. Now let's go to the tax. And we already had one question on tax from Niharika. Her question was, what about government losing revenue, taxing human taxpayers, and as more robots join workforce, replacing human workers, who will pay tax? Ashish, since I want to, since robots are going to create a lot of tax issues, and I want you to cover your tax issues which you feel robots are going to bring in. And when you're covering, can you also cover the question which Niharika has asked? You have try to see a finish in 5 minutes time, if possible. Thanks.
I think a very well thought out question, and there's a lot of debate that has already happened over this very question of the origin. And when I'm talking about the tax issues for robots, I'll come to that question. That's debate. But I think we have looked at it, there are types. I'd like to divide my response in ways. First would be international tax issue, and the other domestic tax issue. I'll first touch upon the international tax issue and then come to the domestic one. From an international perspective, and I'll take docs example here, right? When there is a doctor who's performing surgery, and this doctor is being outside India, and the surgery is performed to a robot without the robot is being. And the question that comes up is, and you are ending up in doctors, everywhere. The question is, the taxpayers in India have the right to receive some of that money as tax that you pay to the government. I think that becomes a very important and pertinent question when it comes to tax robots. So I'll take this example and which is on enterprise. Now, yeah, in that fixed base is considered to be a fixed base moment of that on enterprise. This is not to be considered fixed base of the doctor which is performing the surgery. Likewise, if you consider this to be a foreign establishment, the question is what is the tax that you're going to end up paying. Now, under Indian laws, tax is whatever extent profits of the payment that you have made to the doctor will be attributed to the service. 40% of that amount is supposed to be paid as now, like fixed base, there are other concepts of permanent establishment. Some of them are construction permanent establishment, service permanent establishment. As the name suggests, they deal with construction-related activities carried out in India or services or provided. Therefore, the question is which bracket do we fall into, right? And is there even a bracket that there exists? That maybe there is an amendment required in all these treaties which provides for something like a robot leave, where if you are performing services to a robot, will that be considered to be a robot permanent establishment and tax in that manner? Or would it just fall in one of the other limbs, which could be a fixed base or any other service permanent establishment or any other of those services? Well, currently the answers to these questions are all just everywhere. Don't really have one clear answer. But the BEPS action plan, which has been doing a lot currently with it suggests something when it comes to taxing the digital economy, where it said that one potential option would be taxing a fully dematerialized activity which has maintained a presence. And if that takes place, they have recommended that to consider it to be a permanent establishment and tax as per the local laws of permanent establishment. What is a fully dematerialized activity? It's basically any activity which is carried out without any intervention. The service provided, the core service provided is not taking place with. And significant digital presence would mean that the number of activities that are carried out by that technology, by that robot, if it is sums of money which are substantial amount, that would be considered to be a significant digital. The questions that need to be answered when we, as the law evolves, we perhaps have answers to these. Other small aspect I'd like to discuss before I get into the questions is that of transfer pricing. Transfer pricing has an important role to play when it comes to related parties where an arm's length price has to be paid. If there is a service or good that is being that is being from one entity to the other related entity. In a situation where arm's length price has to be determined, you have to look into the FAR analysis, that is the functions, assets, and risks that the enterprise is taking on, and you compare it to an enterprise which is also carrying out the same activity, a comparable enterprise. Now, in a situation where you have an enterprise which is carrying out work through a robot, as opposed to the same activity being done through humans, where is the comparable? When will we reach that stage of comparables with all humans? Therefore, can we ever achieve the exact arm's length price considering the comparables are not really there, right? Third point, on domestic issue point, and I think Niharika has brought about is what about the government losing money because there are no human taxpayers? Very important question, and that brings us to debate as to whether we can consider a robot to be an employee. Because if a robot is considered to be an employee, then how are you making it? Will there be a withholding tax? Will the salary be utilized for what purposes? How will the accounting work for these robots when you are making the salary? But the fundamental question here is whether in the first place can they be considered to be employees, right? Humans who are receiving money and you think that I think that's the bigger debate. But to come to the question about taxing, how will the government receive money because of the unemployment issues? I think their question is, can the government implement something which is like an automation tax, where if a company is working with robots, can there be a tax on that company because it is working with robots? There have been reports, there have been suggestions made where you provide incentives to human employers. When a human being is employed in your company, you provide incentives which could be of various nature, as opposed to a robot where you disincentivize them and tell them that you are using a robot, you will not get the benefit that we see. These are some ways in which the government can introduce some ways to tax robots and perhaps help all those unemployed people that perhaps we'll see in the near future. That's it from my end. Vaibhav, over to you.
Thank you, Ashish. Tax is a very complex subject, and I think I know you can go on for ages, but thanks for finishing in a short, sweet manner. There are a lot of other issues which we have not covered here, which are very critical, very important. For example, privacy and data protection. As we know, robots are going to deal with a lot of information. They will have sensors, including camera, to capture faces of the people, and they will have medical information in the robots which are working in healthcare. And a lot of questions will come on what about the data which is being generated? What about that? How it's going to be addressed? What kind of issues can come? What about profiling? Can robots take decision, use that data, or just like how humans have data protection law where they can't do certain things or they can do certain things, will that be applied to robots? So privacy, data protection also will be an important factor as robots evolve. Security and hacking. As we said, that a lot of robots will be controlled by people working from home. We also said that there will be robots instructing other robots, right? What if the security is compromised? What if they are hacked? What if the control is taken by someone else? What kind of damage it can create? How the whole liability would work? What kind of rules and regulations we need so that at that point of time the damage is minimized, right? So those are the things which you need to consider. I think Huzefa touched very briefly on intellectual property before, where he talked about a robot creating IP and how do you do the ownership. So those are all different aspects which we need to think on, and there are answers to that at this point of time as the law says today, but the answers will change over a period of time. With this, let me address a couple of questions what we have. I think there's a question from Karthik Tyagi, which I will just address. His question is very simple. He says, "Is product smartwatch considered robot?" I think at at this point of time, no, if you really go and look at the definition of robots, it's basically doing a particular functionality. I would look at it, say that if it replaces a human functionality in that sense and doing a particular functionality, then it would be considered to be a robot. If it's just capturing and telling you how much your heart rate is or how much steps you walk, it should not be considered to be a robot. Then there is a question from Mr. Sen Gupta, and this is a question, it's a hypothetical question as he mentions, and the question really is can robots be granted fundamental rights, right? And how they are going to be affected. If there is a right, then how it affects democracy, how it affects in industries and working the industries, what kind of policy should be framed. Now, this is where I think Doc and Preetha already touched upon somewhat, but I would like Huzefa to talk on fundamental rights, and then I will add on for a couple of points.
So I think, thank you, Sen Gupta, for the question. Just to step back, right, the fundamental rights are only available to citizens of India. Now the whole question is, how do you become a citizen of India? The citizenship of India is governed by a law which is called the Citizenship Act of 1955, which essentially, if you read it, is more akin to natural persons. That either you're by birth or Indian, either you're by descent, and either you are by certification by the authority. But it is essentially akin to a natural person. Now, of course, there could be a particular debate whereby the Citizenship Act is amended, but I think that is not likely to happen in the near future. And when it comes to democracy, right, I think the fundamental premise of a democracy is the right to choose who you want to power. It is nothing but also linked to your voting right. I think that is also a critical piece of democracy. Of course, saying what you feel like, and to all the fundamental rights. And the right to vote is also linked to citizenship. So, probably to sum up your question, from an Indian perspective, we can say that unless there are certain amendments to certain laws, it will be difficult to grant citizenship to a robot, which would lead to granting robots fundamental rights. But as I said, the interesting bit is that how do you recognize the status of a robot if it's not statehood/citizenship? It will be more akin to a juristic person or an artificial person. I think that answers the question, but over to Vaibhav.
Yeah, thanks, Huzefa. Just to add that I don't think in future anybody will grant any fundamental right to robot. There may be some rights granted, that's up for debate. What kind of rights should they have? But it will be more to deal with how people should interact with robots or how other robots should interact with robots. Having said it, just keep in mind that there are a lot of animals there. There are a lot of and then this animal does have rights in some situations, but not all animals have rights, and and neither they are fundamental rights. You will have robots which have feeling in future, and those robots which have feeling in future may possibly will have more rights compared to robots who are just who has no feeling in that, right? But with this, I think there are more questions coming up, which unfortunately we can't take right now because we are running out of time. And I will close this session. And over to you, Mamta, for closing.
Thank you, Vaibhav, Huzefa, and Dr. Antani, Ashish, Preetha for a very insightful and educated discussion today. Our next session will be held today evening at 9 p.m. IST on IP issues in digital media. Stay tuned for interesting sessions every day. You can register on our website or through LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us, and you may now disconnect your line.
Thank you. And sorry, people, we couldn't take all the questions, but we can take it offline. And thank you for being such a wonderful participant.